Good evening, Tuesday, October 11th, 2022. Wow, what an amazing and difficult world we are living in. And tonight's podcast addresses so much of the pain and trauma and need for breathing new life into our world, into each other, into people. Quite literally, our guest tonight is an internationally recognized trainer in cardiac pulmonary resuscitation. But she's also someone I've met just a few months ago that has impressed me with a really keen truth that there are people in this world that are natural rescuers. And without them, many of us wouldn't be here. And that's on every level, from being rescued quite literally from death to being rescued spiritually, emotionally, economically. There are rescuers in this world. And we're going to learn a whole lot from Dr. Susan Davis, who I'm introducing right now. She is authoring a book called The Rescue Lifestyle. She is right now sitting in the trenches, quite literally the trenches of Hurricane Ian. She's in Punta Gorda, and we'll talk about that. And I want to come out of this evening with all of us taking a deep breath and deep gratitude for being alive and having each other to resuscitate us. So, without further ado, I am going to introduce to all of you Dr. Susan Davis.
Tanya, good evening. What a lovely welcome. Thank you.
Oh, no, I've been looking forward to this now for like a month, and I just didn't know quite when to get you on and get you ready for prime time. I'd like to start by asking you, you were not, you became a nurse later in your life, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. Talk to me a little bit about your life history. You're not 30, so we know you've had quite a bit of build up to this incredible moment where I understand you're launching a business, you're training thousands of people in advanced resuscitation techniques, you're working on coaching and corporate training. It's just you're everything to so many people. But how did you get here, Susan? What did you want to be in life, and how did you become, and your major your umbrella company is called Rescue RN. So how did you get here?
Wow, that's a really big question. Man, inadvertently, I just wound up here. But I guess originally I thought I was going to be a veterinarian. I mean, since I was a kid, I always thought I was going to be a vet. And I did follow that path in school and in my education. And then one thing led to another. And frankly, I'm extremely fascinated by the world. And it's very hard for me to choose one thing. I think that's why the whole rescue RN thing comes into play here now later down in my life. But yeah, so I went to school to be a veterinarian. I went to University of Illinois, and I was really knocking at the door of that. And I ultimately started my family, and I've been very happy and pleased to be a mom for the last, well, gosh, my oldest is 26. So for the last 26 years. And then somewhere along that path, it just my path with nursing crossed, and I've never looked back. I applied all my education from my veterinary medicine to human medicine, and then the joy and the pride that I've had in being a nurse ever since has just allowed me to grow and blossom into where we are right now.
I guess I'd like to ask you what becoming a nurse meant to you.
You know, I think a lot of nurses, um, there's a pivotal moment that says, all of a sudden I'm going to be a nurse. And frankly, this is not something I've ever really discussed before, but I remember the day and the moment that I decided to become a nurse. And it was honestly in my own medical situation. I was in a physician's office, and I ended up having a gross melanoma on my shoulder. And as he was removing this melanoma, he said, I know a girl just like you, your same age. And after she went through something like this, she became a nurse because she just felt the need to help people. And I was like, a nurse, huh? All right. Anyway, it was like the next day I signed up.
Wow.
And then I got my associates and then my bachelor's and then my master's and my doctorate. I just never stopped. It was very easy after that. It was a momentous change for me personally. And once I saw what nurses did, the different model, the different model between thinking like a doctor versus thinking like a nurse, forget it. A nurse was all for me. And I still get asked that question, why didn't you become a doctor? Oh man, there's a million reasons.
All right. Well, you need to stop for a moment and define for us what your perspective on thinking like a doctor versus thinking like a nurse.
Well, the medical doctor is just that, medicine doctor, medical doctor. They treat with medicine. They treat disease, and nurses do a very a further assessment, which is a lot more upstream. We are holistic thinkers ultimately, and we don't think at the problem that's just before us by any means. We think way upstream, and we would love. And nurses right now are doing a million things upstream in health and mental health and physical health, trying to prevent that medical model, but before they even get to us. So we are not really interested in being the chop shop, when they get to us already sick. So the nursing model is far more fluid all the way around what causes disease prior, hopefully, to when we end up seeing it.
Fascinating. Well, I do know quite a bit about your venture into the world of training nurses in an improved way to deliver cardiac arrest response. How in the heck did a PhD nurse become interested in CPR?
Well, it happened long before that. It happened long before that. When my first job as a nurse, I actually worked in the ER, and then in the trauma ER, in fact, which is the love of my life. I met some of the greatest people I've ever known in my entire life in that ER. And back then, when they call a code blue from the inpatient environment, we would respond, and you get there. And frankly, what you see is truly just a hot mess. And I was always astounded by that. And I did come to the profession later in life. So I just can't imagine. I was thinking, like, I would leave there and there wouldn't be any high fives, like, wow, that was a rock star event. It wasn't. It was pure chaos. And we would get there and have to take over. And I saw the emotions in the room and the feelings in the room. And anyway, long and the short of it is, I got upset about it. And I felt like the critical care teams somehow, even inadvertently, made other areas feel less than in any way, shape, or form. Or maybe they felt less than because they were scared and they weren't even, it's a low frequency, high risk event. And it's not something we practice. So I just thought, like, this is so easy. This is basic life support. Why aren't we doing it? And then everyone's like, well, it's inpatient and critical care. But frankly, when you looked at the critical care teams, well, they all didn't do it right either. We all jumped the gun and head towards advanced life support before basic life support. And that's just not how it works. So one thing led to another, Tanya, and I decided that it's got to be an easier way. There's got to be an easier way. And then, I spent the last nearly decade of my life.
And let me just stop you and underpin that you were responding to this sense that this is the basis of medicine, right? Saving lives in an emergency situation. And for you, CPR was being delivered in a non-dignified way to those that were participating, chaotic, full of fear, and demeaning to those that weren't a part of the critical rescue team. Did I hear you correctly?
I feel like I might have just presented it that way. It's not all that bad. They're really good. They're all very good at what they do. They're trained in what they do, and they're doing the best, and they really are. But ultimately, it wasn't nearly as smooth as it could be. It wasn't as collaborative as it should be. There's a lot of fear when it doesn't happen very often. It's easy for us who work in critical care to be like, oh, wow, we do this all the time. But if you don't do it all the time, so yeah, a lot of those emotions came up down the line over my years of studying this. I ended up, I've spent many years now studying the in-hospital cardiac arrest response, what are hospitals in this country and around the world, what are they doing for their training? What does it look like? How much time and money are they spending on it? And what are they ultimately getting, right? So we have this foundational education. It could be American Heart, it could be Red Cross. There's
And you've
several of
worked
them.
for all of them as a trainer, correct? You worked for
Correct.
most of them, right?
Yeah. So, but ultimately, whether it's instructor-led face-to-face training, which is what myself and my team have done for the last 10 years, and trained so many thousands of healthcare providers, or a blended learning or a completely online learning. The bottom line is, regardless of the training, that's once every 2 years, which, by the way, the research has shown that is not enough, which is, no one's hearing me, it's not enough. and the research has said it for years and years and years. The bottom line is none of it translates, Tanya. None of it translates to bedside. It does not come through. So every 2 years.
Training that you go to, because I've gone to CPR training. So there's a training that you go through, and you do compressions, and you breathe in the airway, and you wait for the ambulance to come, kind of situation. Well, for me, right, because I'm not a medical professional. But that's how I know, when I've worked in hospitals, that's how we train nurses as well, right? We take them in a special room with a special, demonstration doll, and that's where they go. And then when they have to do it for real, you're saying that's lost in translation.
Well, quite often you're when you go to one of those classes, you're in the land far, far away from where you actually practice. You're with people who are not on your team. You're with instructors who cause anxiety, and a lot of people hate it. Listen, I'm gonna tell you, people hate going to their basic, advanced, and pediatric life support courses. Most of them do. Most of them can't stand it. So they're already anxiety ridden. And then the equipment that they're using in the classroom is generally not the equipment that they're going to use in their actual space. So all of this, to me, and frankly, there's hundreds of millions of people who are training around the world, and they all, they'll get an iPad and they'll have simulated rhythms here because it's clear and it's nice, but it's not reality. And when you look at the research says that it's not translating to bedside. So we're still not doing what we need to do. We're not getting compressions in 1 minute, generally, yes, but they're too fast generally, and they're too deep generally. We can see this information with feedback devices. And it's very rare to shock in 2 minutes, and that's the gold standard, not only in this country, but every country. So with the national average for rapid response teams to get to the bedside is 4.3 to 4.5 minutes, but we're supposed to shock in the first 2. I say that's a problem. So it's, the other things that you mentioned earlier, whether they feel fearful, because, they are fearful of their equipment. They're fearful. Most people are scared to death of a defibrillator. They truly are. We don't get to handle it enough. And I find that ridiculous. And then, when you have advanced life support equipment on most units, but only advanced people can run them, that's essentially saying, recognize the problem, call for help, begin CPR, and then wait for the, super team to show up so they can push the button.
It's usually definitely longer than 2 minutes.
Well, you know what? There's some rock stars out there that are doing it. I certainly don't want to discount people who are getting it on time, because thank God they are. But in general, I mean, if the average time for rescue teams to arrive, rapid response teams, critical care outreach, whatever they're called, is 4.3 to 4.5 minutes. Everyone who works in the hospital knows that 4 minutes, 9 minutes, 12 minutes, you might be the second code or maybe even the third code. So what do we do until help arrives? And that's what made me upset. It started out back in the day when I worked, as a trauma nurse, getting there and seeing kind of the chaotic scene of, like, how can this be so tough? And I don't think it is that tough. I think we do practice hands-on in their environment with their equipment. We do quick, 2 to 6 minute drills, and we rock this stuff out. And it's continuous quality improvement. Once every quarter in one unit to meet criteria is also not enough.
Mm-hmm. All right. I want to do something interesting. One of the most amazing things that happened in the first conversation I had with you is that you said you would go into a hospital and you would work with nurses, and you could see them walking out the door, standing taller, laughing, smiling, feeling like they had this new superpower, which was courage, confidence, and competency. That, to me, just made me engage with you, because I'm not a nurse, and most of our listeners are here. How do I become healthier? Right there, Those three words you used blew me away, and I'm going to put them down for our courage, confidence, and competency. Can you talk a little bit about how your training not only helps nurses save lives, but helps people who are nurses stand taller in their profession?
Absolutely. So the crazy thing is this conversation you're having right now, because although I set out to fix the cardiac arrest problem, that ended up not being my mission at all. I didn't even know, because I only ever worked critical care. I didn't even know how differently everybody else thought, and I didn't realize how much they dislike it / dread it / fear it. I didn't know. To me, it was just a part of my everyday of nursing. So when I started saying, well, what are you guys so worried about? We're just going to grab this thing, mash really fast, push the pads on and push the button, and that's it. So what's the problem? And they look at me like, well, it's a lot more than that. I'm like, not really. That's really not more than that. And they look at me like, you gotta be kidding me. I'm like, no, come on, let's do it. And after we do this, I mean, they literally, they go from so uptight and nervous and agitated. And I feel this underlying worry about being humiliated, which goes to that dignity thing. It's like, to feel like you're a nurse and you should be owning a situation at any cost, but you're really nervous about it and you're not sure. And for whatever reason, you're afraid to ask. So we would do CodePRep together, and we would laugh. I mean, we would laugh and we would laugh and laugh. They would quickly do it, and they'd be so nervous doing it. And they would put the pads on. And I always joke, I'm like, okay, so let's talk about the pad placement. It's a little off, we got it. And we would laugh. But after just 6 minutes of drills, and everyone who didn't want to do it would get involved. CNAs, nurses, PT, OT, pharmacy is getting in there. I mean, everybody on the unit wants to do this, because it's an ultimate fear for all of us. We work in healthcare. What if we don't know what to do? So yes, then, I actually created CodePRep in my master's, and I beta launched it in a critical care area, and they loved it, and they loved it, and they requested it, and then the next unit and the next unit. So ultimately, in my doctorate, I studied, the title of my doctorate was nurse, what the heck was it? Nurse and interprofessional resuscitation drills for nurse and interprofessional self-efficacy. And I refused to measure anything else. All I wanted to know, and I used a basic resuscitation self-efficacy scale. Do they feel better after they do this or not? And okay, they went huge off the charts. Yes, of course they felt better. If they had hands-on practice with their equipment in their unit, they felt worlds better. My original research, Tanya, showed that 86% of those who participated in my research study had never handled their emergency equipment.
Whoa.
Over 57% had never been in a code. So you got to practice. Practice makes, not perfect, but practice makes good.
Well, what you just said now is kind of really exciting. This whole idea of self-efficacy. Self-efficacy, courage, competence, confidence. This is 9/28/22, and I know you're probably close to crying, but
that's me.
This is where you were, sweetie, and I was online with you because I was deathly worried. I know you've lost quite a bit, if not everything, on your island home. I know how bad it is for you personally. So I was amazed, freaking amazed, when I heard you say, literally 2 days after your roof blew off, your electricity was gone, you didn't know if the road was open, I got to get to the command center. I've got to get to rescue work. You had your mother taken care of, your kids, and I just, wow. Now, I haven't talked to very many people who sat in the eye of Hurricane Ian, which is proving to be the most deadly and costly storm and devastating storm in the history of the United States. I wasn't there, but you were. And you found that rescue lifestyle to get out there and to have courage and to have confidence and competence to help. Please describe what went down. I know it's so hard. I know you have a blog that you wrote about fellow nurses, and I'm going to give the link in a moment. But if you can talk a little bit about this moment of being caught in the eye of this storm and how it made you feel and what you've begun to feel about people around you, especially in the healthcare world.
It's a phenomena. I mean, it's a phenomena. Anyone who knows me knows that I'm not generally short of words, and I love my words. But the words that we, dredged up from the pandemic for ourselves, for nursing. We used perseverance, and we used, oh gosh, what were the words? They don't even seem to fit anymore. I don't know what words fit anymore, but I can tell you that. I was here. I lived on Pine Island during Hurricane Charlie, and Hurricane Charlie was a heck of an ordeal. And I lived through the aftermath. And I actually worked. I was the director of the long-term recovery for Lee County on Pine Island for our last major hurricane, and this one right here. Anyway, so Ian, that Category 4. And that picture was pretty crazy, right? I mean, that blue dot, that Category 4, but. Collier County, Charlotte County, Lee County, the center of the state. And I know you were on the East Coast of Florida, and you've got a lot too, but I don't even know where to begin with the words. I can just say that what I've seen since, as far as nursing goes in my community, I wish I had the right words. Just primal. Anyway. The sounds, you'll hear people describe the sounds when they were in their homes sheltering. It was primal. And I feel primal is like the closest word I can get. Primal empathy, I think, is where I am, is where we are, is where our nurses are. I have colleagues who have lost everything. And they have showed up to work literally with the clothes on their back to help. I mean, we evacuated 3 hospitals. No water, no electricity in our hospitals. A team staying in there with no electricity, no water. B team coming in afterwards, not even knowing what they had left out there. A team coming out. Many of them lost their cars while they were in there doing A team. Oh my goodness. The examples of chivalry and kindness and love and this primal empathy is, I don't know what other words to use, to be honest.
Resuscitation is a big word, right? It means to bring back to life. It means to breathe new life into. How is that happening on the west coast of Florida?
It's a wonderful thing how CodePRep, I went from CodePRepping, one nurse at a time, one unit at a time, and then the CodePRepping started to not be the focal point. It started to become that self-efficacy thing. It translated into that feel good, that laughter, that standing tall. And then that became my mission, right? And then, something like this now, it only just heightens all of that. It's so much. I think I choose to push even still with CodePRep because it works and it's good, but because it's the core of a nurse is the worst possible thing that can happen is a family member or a patient dying. And if you have that confidence in that moment, then pretty much there isn't anything we can't handle. But Hurricane Ian right now, what's happening in resuscitation, it's happening. We are helping one another. We are finding homes for one another. We are backing up each other. Our leadership is mind-blowingly amazing right now. I mean, I'm so proud to be a nurse, to be in this community, to be part of a system that's taking care of. I can't even explain the resources that are being distributed to our team members throughout the Tri-County area right now. Our patients, our community, our nurses, if there's a possible resource you can think of, we have it accessible, and or someone will get it for you somehow. Other than trying to come up with homes, that's been the trickiest, right? Because if you live in Florida or near Florida, you know what our housing market was like prior to this, and rentals, and people who've lost their homes completely. It's like, oh my gosh, oh my goodness, where are they going to go?
Right.
It's horrifying.
And I want to bring up this whole idea of a code blue, and because I'm, my PhD work was in poetry, and so I've lived most of my decades looking for the art in sadness and tragedy, and making connections that other people might think are silly. But code blue is when loss of life, imminent loss of life, and you need to do everything possible to save that life. And as a person, Dr. Davis, that's what you're committed to doing, finding ways to stop the imminent loss of life. That's phenomenal. And it seems like Hurricane Ian was your test, because I know you're trying to get Rescue RN, which I have, it's rescuern.com. No spaces, rescuern.com. And if you go on there right now, those that are watching and listening, you will see a blog. And her very first blog is on the trauma of Hurricane Ian, and what she sees as the most amazing. I think you use grit in the people around her to get through. I love another conversation I had with you prior to Hurricane Ian that said, when you teach CodePRep, when you teach code blue technique, you teach it as a way to approach a life and death situation, not just technique, but everything from visual acuity, who's in the room, what's going on, what could have happened. I mean, you have this very holistic way. It's not just about all clear, use the paddles, right? It's about collaboration and a kind of a visual creativity in how to approach, and I dare say, any traumatic situation in life, right? It's kind of cool. Talk a little bit about the core of your training. It starts with visual acuity. There's I tried to do all my research here, the triage. Talk to us as if
Triage, track, and trigger. You're doing pretty good. You're doing pretty good. Well,
talk to us as if you're coaching me through trauma.
Well, first of all, it's a brilliant insight on your part, to pick up on the fact that my training is very, very different. I'm not teaching people how to do basic, advanced, or pediatric life support. They already have a course for that, right? There's giants in the field that have mastered it, right? American Heart, Red Cross, and others. That's done. My program is putting it to use. We're putting it to work. Like, let's do this. Let's stop. I don't want that whole thing, knowledge is power, but really it's not. I said that my whole life. I remember saying that my whole life, knowledge is power. I thought it was so cool because I had knowledge. Knowledge isn't anything if you don't use it. So it's really about using it. And I think, to your point, right? Recognize the problem, call for help, and begin action. That can translate to anything in life. That can translate to any trauma. That can translate to mental health. That can translate to waking up in the morning anymore, right? Recognize the problem, get help, and act. And this was about an act. And you can't, if you don't do it, you'll lose it, right? If you don't use it, you lose it. So this is about hands-on, brief, repetitive, breaking it down. I realized long ago that nobody reads anymore. And in fact, they want to be taught in like a minute or less, and with pictures, preferably. So if you'll ask any of my students, I've taught, in nursing and also in the paramedic program, that my big term is meat and potatoes. I'm only interested in the meat and potatoes. And this is how my program came about, right? I cut out all the big fluff. I'm not interested in all that high end. You don't have to be, one of my big pushes, you don't have to be a rhythms expert, right? What scares a lot of people away from critical nurses, away from critical care, is they feel like they're not going to be good enough. Like they feel like they're not going to understand those rhythms, and they're scared of the rhythms. Well, the beauty is the machine understands whether it's a shock rhythm or not. So honest to goodness, if you push one button, it turns it into an AED, a manual defibrillator, and it'll do it for you. So my big push behind my program is less is more. It's far more simpler than we make it. Even critical care people are not all that in a bag of chips. They're scared too. I mean, you cannot not have your own elevation when someone's trying to die in front of you. I don't care if you do it all day and every day. So anyway, the premise of my program is that it's far easier than we make it. And then my critical care teams are like, when are we going to get to the, and I'm like, you show me minute 4. You show me you got 1 through 4, and we'll move on to your, advanced CodePRep, which we have as well. We have advanced, and then we have specialty stuff, for ED, ICU, specialty areas,
Pediatric,
OR, and so on and so forth. So.
Wow. But I still, it's funny. I'm going to pull something up that I just, in my research before we spoke, let me see. I'll grab it from here.
And pediatric. Don't forget the peds. I love my peds.
Yeah, that's so important.
And the NICU. I'm scared of the NICU, but we're in there too.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I can only imagine how frightening that can be. Okay. So this is the CPR step-by-step that I pulled up so that I could feel really intelligent talking to you. But as I was reading this and thinking about just the trauma of somebody's heart stopping in front of me, and I've actually seen this. Fortunately, there was a nurse who in a restaurant that used the AED definitely within 3 minutes. She shocked the guy. He didn't have a pulse when he fell, or it was real weak. And she's like, yeah, well, bring the AED. Anybody can use it, But what's fascinating to me is this is how the American Heart Association has this 6-step approach to CPR. The first one is call 911 or ask someone else to. Lay the person on their back, make sure they can breathe. If they're not breathing, start CPR, which starts with the chest compressions. You talk a lot about, most people don't need to do these rescue breaths, just get the AED. Can you walk me through this that I have up on the screen?
Yeah. Well, it used to be the ABCs for a jillion years: airway, breathing, circulation. And then if you looked at, it's hard for me to see, but the second to last box looks like, is that guy breathing for that guy?
Okay, yeah, so 2 rescue breaths.
Yeah. So not anybody, it's really kind of out. It's not in vogue any longer to be puckering up, and swap and spit, whether someone's dying or not, unless it's your personal loved one, right? So even the American Heart came up with years ago, hands-only CPR, because people were getting afraid of giving mouth to mouth. So they wouldn't do anything at all. But all the research shows, Tanya, that it's compressions and electricity that save the life. So airway isn't important, yes. And what I train is open the airway, because oftentimes if your patient is squished, and you need to at least open the airway. Mm-hmm. There's many pre-hospital protocols right now. So EMS, our local EMS, has a very long apneic period. I think it's 6 to 8 minutes. And I must have said this 8,000 times and they correct me every time. It's 8 minutes of apneic CPR where they're concentrating on compressions and electricity, because that's what the research shows. That's the top and best evidence. So the best evidence around the world is, like at the top, recognize the problem, call for help, 911. If you're in the hospital, you holler help, and then there'll be a code, an internal code that they call, or there's a code blue button depending on what you have.
I watch Grey's Anatomy. I can do this.
Yes, you can. That's it. Push hard and fast. I mean, we right now anymore, since 2015, I think you had to have devices with feedback devices so that we can really see our rate, our depth, and our recoil. Bottom line is fast and hard and as best as you can, right? It's the best you can. If no one else is there, then you're it and you're up. That's what I call rescue number 1.
I'm going to stop you right there, because we want to talk about how learning CPR, learning resuscitation, is a lesson in wellness. This whole thing that I do here is rethink your health, right? How can we take away from this conversation with Dr. Davis a way to rethink our health, a way to rethink when we feel we need to be saved, right? Or we need to save someone. And as I was looking at this, silly me, I always look at the poetry and the metaphor, right? So the very first thing I see here is call a friend. Call a friend who knows how to rescue you. right? So let's just think for a moment. I am so down that I want to lose my life, or I can't, my health is so bad. I just can't figure out a way to rise above my pain physically and emotionally. I think the first thing that you do is you call someone. If you don't have a friend, you don't have family, and there are many of us that don't, you call a helpline, right? So this is Tanya here. This isn't Dr. Davis. I'm doing this as a part of rethinking trauma for us because this is so powerful, right? And then the second thing you do is like lay down, get comfortable, and freaking breathe, right? Take those deep breaths, reconnect your mind, your heart, your body, your blood flow, your lungs to being alive. And that's a part of CPR, getting that breath to flow, getting that heart to beat. There are two things. The first thing you have to do, because I did my homework, is you've got to get that heart to start beating to pump the blood to the lungs, which is right next to it, in order to start breathing. So there are two things we have to worry about to have a good, healthy life. One is keeping our blood flowing. Two is breathing clearly and deeply. And that's the essence of resuscitation. And then, of course, this whole idea of compression, this whole idea of physically moving. You know, one of the biggest movements I've ever seen going to funerals or watching people grieve or suffer is just putting their hands on their own chest and cradling their heart and touching and compressing. You know this move, right, Susan? Just in grief alone, it's a life-saving technique, even if you've not had your heart stop. And then, of course, help will arrive. And I do like the idea of shocking yourself back to life because sometimes that's exactly what it takes. Some kind of shock, almost losing your child, almost losing your own life, being in an accident. It shocks you into life. It shocks you back to appreciating the smallest things, including your breath and your blood flow. And I'm sorry, it was so powerful for me to read your work, Susan, to understand that you have a goal of helping nurses around the world resuscitate patients, resuscitate each other and themselves. That is crazy. I think the byline on your website is saving lives and helping ourselves or something. And that's powerful. So, did I totally mess up medically?
No, you did brilliant. It was a brilliant metaphor, and it's so true. And that's the whole resuscitating each other thing. I will add just one part that we skipped. And in fact, in my program, I had to go back to. I would be remiss if I didn't go back to your beautiful, beautiful rendition of exactly how this translates to each other, and even healthcare. But that key piece, the visual acuity, which I never got into, recognizing the problem isn't just oh crap, that one looks dead, or crap, my best friend looks really depressed or really is on the brink of something bad.
Thank you for completing the metaphor. Yes.
Yeah. So just to go back just that one step, the visual acuity is learning, and I did it very, very simple, green, yellow, red. Green, it was based on triage from, MCI, from was a mass casualty incident, whatever. It's green is, you're good. Yellow is caution, and red means not so is bad, right? So what does that mean? I mean, if your friend or your patient is green, then we're like, all right, that's their baseline, they're cool. When they're yellow, it's just as if something's off. And it could be just your instinct saying, you know what, I heard it in her voice today when I spoke to her on the phone, or I know she's been going through, right now, you know how many of my friends are yellows? There's signs all over the place that I'm watching for not only my entire community, my healthcare system, but my friends and then individuals and our leaders. We're all yellow right now after Hurricane Ian. And then red is, oh bleep, like we're there. This is
the shock.
Yeah, this is where you bring your emergency equipment closer. This is where you get set up. This is where you are checking. This is where you're continuously checking. This is where you've notified the family, notified the provider, whatever it means, whatever we're referring to, whether it's in your personal life or whatever. But if we don't have an early warning system, which I don't like to call I call it visual acuity because it truly is that. It's 10 seconds or less across the room conversation. It's nothing people have to chart. It's nothing, but I have a community version too, to your story, to your thoughts, and your, this is wonderful how we're going to resuscitate each other. But we have to be more conscientious before it happens. Like the best cardiac arrest or the best friend save is before it happens. So continuously assessing one another, our patients, each other, and knowing what to do when they're yellow. That's what we do. So we say, you're green, all's good in the hood. Yellow, okay, warning signs, even if it's just your intuition. And what do we do about that? That's the triage track. And then trigger. What is it? What type of response is it going to trigger? Is it triggering the lowest response, just getting prepared? Or is it the ultimate response of, resuscitation?
And what's fascinating is when you give nurses the confidence to trust themselves again, to know that they are as valuable as any doctor at a code blue, if not more so, because they tend to have better visual acuity. You're saving lives and you're helping prevent cardiac arrest. Confident people see more, they help more, they do more. And so your resuscitation approach is helping nurses see more, do more. It's it's a pretty simple and powerful model.
It is, and it translates. If you're involved in a cardiac arrest, let's say you're a brand new nurse, right? You're scared to death. Nurses would rather die themselves than get in the way or do it wrong. They would be unforgiving, and it happens. And so this is how we lose nurses. This is how we lose team members. And then they take that home, Tanya. They take that home. So the ripple effect of a nurse who feels like she did wrong or didn't do enough or wasn't able or couldn't get out her own way. She wasn't good enough, or he wasn't good enough. And then they go home to their family, to their children, to their husband, to their life. The ripple is horrifying. Nurses are prideful, intelligent, wonderful, compassionate humans. So when we code prep with them, when they've done their drills, I can promise you it's so darn easy that every time I've trained them, there's been a save. Every single time. I mean, it works. It's really stupid. It's just very simple. You just do the few steps and it works.
Yeah, but
and they leave there knowing they did the best that they could for that patient, period. Yeah. If that patient's going to stay on this earth, it's going to happen in those first 2 to 6 minutes, primarily. Mm-hmm. So, they go home standing tall too, to their family members.
It's just a really beautiful way to rethink trauma in life too, right? Breathe, get the blood flowing, protect your heart, look around, identify the problem, solve it, call for help, wait for it to come. It's pretty cool. I put up here for everyone to look at www.CodePREPCPR.com. That is a place for nurses or healthcare workers, emergency techs, or anyone, honestly, who's interested in CPR and its benefits and being confident that you know how to physically rescue somebody. You can register to get Dr. Susan's newsletter. And also, I understand that you're having a free introductory training on the 17th of November, 1 hour online, totally free, to really help introduce people to the core program, what it is, and what are the concepts that can help you become a better resuscitation technician, artist, human being. It's pretty cool. So please go ahead there and sign up. It's right there. And then Rescue RN is more, let's talk a little bit more about your broader vision of working with nurses who are definitely frontliners, who are definitely bedside nurses. You want to coach them, lead them, train them. Talk a little bit about that future vision for you.
Well, the first module, and when after we do our, that free thing that I'm doing where we're going to do basically it's going to be meeting me. What the heck am I talking about? What is high performance resuscitation really about? What's the science? What are you talking about, you crazy lady? What could be different than basic, advanced, and pediatric life support, blah, blah, blah. So after that, then I have created the courses, but the first module in my course is mindset, having a CodePRep mindset. And that's really where I started to branch into the rescue RN idea. I have been studying CodePRep for, oh my golly, anyone who knows me, any people who have worked with me for almost 10 years now have known that I've been living, I think it was 2016 is when I started CodePRep, and I've been training people since then. So I really felt that I was getting stuck in cardiac arrest, even though it's my passion. And that whole mindset thing started really blossoming, in me and in the people that I work with. So this empowering of nurses just became that was like so much more fun. And then they were hand in hand. So like, can we actually have fun and be empowered and do cardiac arrest? Well, yeah, like you already know how to do CPR. Now let's just put it together and make it happen. But that mindset part really started to blossom. And I've been working with a lot of, I have my paramedic license as well. So I work with a lot of EMS in our community, in our school district, all on their heart saving stuff. It just became Rescue RN became who I am and what I do. And CodePRep turns out to be my super cool program that I created, back in the day. And so CodePRep is my core program right now, but Rescue RN is what I do. I mean, I've done disaster work prior to being a nurse. I've worked in emergency nursing. I love working with everything that's happening around. Okay, so then we have a pandemic, and then we have this. Golly, where do you even go with this? Like, the dignity, and I started seeing all these feelings that I'm having translating from when I'm empowering nurses, and they're getting stronger, and they're walking tall, and they're feeling good. I'm like, that was so silly. It's so easy. It's just communicating, it's recognizing the dignity in them and honoring it. And in those, it's something you don't even have to say, right? You don't even need words to honor the dignity inside somebody. But when you do it to nurses, holy cow, now you're starting a revolution, right? Because nurses are already so powerful. And if they feel less powerful because of our pandemic and our world and all this jazz that's going on, well then, gosh darn it, that's what I do. So Rescue RN became something that I had to do so that I can do more. I need to get to more. I can't keep just CodePREPing in my local area here because it's not enough. I'm not reaching enough people. And everywhere I do it, they want more of it. So it just became, I don't know. I guess it just
an extension, a natural extension,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because when you save a patient from cardiac arrest, it's not all over, right? There's a whole process of therapy. There's a whole process of re-entering life, hopefully with new habits, with the, just appreciation for being alive. And it's the same thing. I love that, recognizing the dignity in nurses and honoring it. And that is really a real rescue mentality, right? It's funny. I tried. I'm so empathetic, and it's really hard for me to see some of the rescue videos that have come out of my sister and my brother's world over there. And I mean, not literally. I'm talking about sisterin and brethren, but it's so hard to watch all that misery. But I did see one that went viral of a man wading through waist high water to rescue a cat that was on top of an AC. And it was that moment, I can understand he's rescuing an old person, a baby, another adult. But that to me was the defining human moment, that there was compassion for something that most people wouldn't have compassion for. And I realized that in these great human tragedies, if you believe in God, there is a billboard for what humanity can be. And I think, Dr. Davis, your resuscitation program is a billboard of how we can save each other. Mindset, watching out for each other, acting, not just seeing the problem, not worried in some instances. Sorry, because I know lots of hospitals are doing this program, not worrying about the rules. I mean, I looked at this archaic rule that so many hospitals have is you have to wait until an MD is in the room to use the AED equipment, when there's AED equipment in the movie theater that the ushers can use if I have a heart attack. I don't get it. It's archaic, and it's just oppressive to me. That if the housekeeping staff is in the room and I'm having a heart attack, they should be trained in how to use the AED. I'm sorry. I know we're a litigious society, but everywhere in the world, we've equipped it with electric shock for cardiac arrest. And all of a sudden, hospitals are saying, nurses, we know you've trained. We know you have 30 plus years experience, Nurse Jones, but you must wait for the resident to come. That's crazy. Am I right?
We won't get me in trouble already. I tend to be quite, I tend to have a voice on this particular topic. And I don't think a lot of systems, all things cardiac arrest in the in-hospital system tend to be, again, siloed. There's many different facets to it. And I'm going to try to stand up for the healthcare systems at the moment. I just know that if it's all consolidated and looked at by people are now creating resuscitation officers, right? Someone that's one person at least, or a department or a few FTEs, full-time employees, that really focus on all things cardiac arrest. So beginning with their American Heart or whatever they choose for their basic education. But then from there, because each hospital has their standards, right? They have to have so many mock codes a year. And then don't get me crazy about what mock codes are and how often they do them, standardized, not standardized, blah, 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 blah. The story goes on and on and on. But in their defense, I don't know. I don't think it takes very much time, and I don't think it takes very much effort, so I'm not buying it.
Got it.
I can teach them in 6 minutes how to push the button and do it themselves. So when I walk in, I say, by the way, we will be shocking before help arrives. And that's usually a pretty shocking conversation that we have.
I love the way you say what you do can shock the healthcare system.
Yeah.
Listen, I have a question that I ask every one of our guests, and that is, I once thought that health was blank, but now I know that it is blank. The blanks are for you to fill in.
Yeah. So I once thought that health was something I took for granted. I now know that the woman with her health has 1,000 wishes, and the woman without her health has but one. So don't take your health for granted.
Oh, wait a second. That a woman with her health has 1,000 wishes, but without only one. That's really probably the most poetic answer I've gotten in a whole lot of shows. This is what I think our 43rd, maybe. I once thought that health was something that I took for granted, but now I know that a woman with her health has 1,000 wishes, but without her health, only one. Susan, you have rocked my world with the concept of the rescue lifestyle and what it can mean for me, my family, my friendships, and my career in healthcare as I help hospitals improve their response to both, cardiac arrest, as well as to the fact that nurses are leaving in the tens of thousands monthly. And this is a way to restore. And I know that one of your coaching programs that you're going to be offering in 2023 is building a culture of dignity for nurses. And that is, wow, that is just a game changer. When you feel worth something, you can do so much more than when you feel unworthy.
Yeah, without feeling worthy or valued, then you lose your connection. And then if you lose your connection, then what are you doing there? So you leave. I mean, without a connection to your friends or to your colleagues, whether it be work or private or relationships, recognize the dignity in one another and in your cat, by the way. it's not just humanity, it's all living things. That core God-given birthright, it should be recognized and acknowledged and valued, and then worth, and then you have connection. But if they're not feeling that, or they're feeling, humiliated because let's say they didn't know what to do, or they were too scared because they hadn't done it before, right? And then they're that nurse that then the critical care team shows up and, just get out of the way, let us do what we got to do, humiliated, or anyway, it's a reason to leave. It's a reason to leave. You're heartbroken, and then they have to go home to their family feeling that way. So I'm not about it. I'm just not about it at all. And I think it's easy. I think it's easy. I think it's conversations, and it's someone who has a mouth that gets in trouble quite often by just saying it. So, and I plan to. I love the nursing dignity thing. I'm really getting very excited about pushing that area as a rescue nurse.
Yeah, exciting. Well, I have to thank you from the bottom of my heart for being here, for loosening ideas in my head about saving lives that I had not really thought of before. I look forward to going to your website. Again, the website for everyone to look at is www.rescuern.com. And you'll find information there on CodePrep.
Yeah.
And you can click through on different things and register for that free seminar as well. Thank you, Dr. Davis. And I just want to thank you for your service in this catastrophic tragedy that's happened in West Florida to many Americans and people of many cultures living there. And for every phone call you make, for every life that you save, for every child that you comfort, just know that you are really loved, respected, and thank you.
Thank you so much. What a great evening. Thank you, Tanya.
This has been wonderful. Thank you, everyone, for listening, for watching. Remember, we are on YouTube as Rethink Your Health, but the podcast is audio on iHeartRadio, Apple, Google, Spotify, and a bunch of other smaller podcast distributions. Please like us in as many places and listen in as many places as you can. We're very proud to be changing healthcare one new thought at a time. Thanks, Susan. Take care.
Thank you so very much. Good night.